Well, we've all been watching the Manly story, and 7 players have decided that they don't want to wear the rainbow shirt. And it doesn't seem to be just the 7 players, but it also seems to be a few rookies that were going to possibly take their place on the field as well. So the story has grown, but the media have been pushing hard and have been giving them a very hard time. In fact, the column in the New Zealand Herald this week basically said, well, you know, they're not Manly players and they're not even men, basically. My guest is Ronji Tanielu, who is an evangelist. He's a lawyer, and he's also, Ronji, is that a Manly scarf you've got around your neck?
I'm a Manly tragic, actually, Bob. So I love Manly, and I always have. I've had family and friends play for the club in the past. So this is my favorite sport, and rugby league is what they play in heaven. So there we go.
Okay, and the other thing is you're obviously a Pacific Islander, Samoan, so you've sort of got a connection to, I think, all 7 of them, all the 7 that are making a stand, like Israel Folau, are Pacific Islanders. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think most of the boys are actually PI, and they're making, from what I understand, stands based on religious and cultural views. And I think one of the cool things that I've noticed is that regardless of all the apologies that the club is doing, but the coaches actually apologize to them, as well as acknowledge that they need support and they need afi as well, because they're in the firing line from media and everyone on the Twitter mob. And so I think it's cool that the coaches come out to support that. But I think look, I'm a big supporter of the stand that they've decided to make. And to be honest, Bob, I've actually had a chance to engage with the players themselves.
Yeah, so have I, actually.
Yeah, cool. And they've seen a message just saying thank you for those that are supporting and praying, and they're making their stand for different reasons. But I think it's cool to see that I think a lot more people are more balanced in this debate rather than just raging against the stand that they've made.
They must have known when they went to, when they made the stand, when they said to the club, no, they didn't want to wear the shirt. They must have known that there would be a massive blowback, because they would just think Israel Folau, what he went through.
Yeah, I thought it was quite courageous, to be honest. And a lot of those boys are young boys, like they're still in their early, some of them are teenagers and still in their 20s. So they're young boys that I guess counting the cost of their decision. But I think the fact that they were able to do that together was quite cool as well. That whatever the background of their reason for making that stand was, I think they found strength in numbers, strength in their culture, strength in their beliefs, and so I think it's. They weighed up the cost, and then now they're facing that cost. But at the same time, I hope people realize too that these are young men that need support as well. That they're not the enemy. They're just, I guess I think we still live in a free country, or Australia is still a free country, that people can have different opinions and not be abused and attacked just because they have a different view. So I think it's quite a courageous thing they've done. I'm not going to elevate them and say that they're saints, but I do want to say I think that it is a courageous stand.
Although in my blog yesterday, I did comment on the religion of diversity, equality and inclusiveness. Unfortunately, that inclusiveness and that diversity doesn't extend to a biblical sexual ethic. It doesn't extend to views on marriage, on gender and on sexuality. And so therefore, it's not really that inclusive, is it? So they're in for a hiding, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, I think the thing is with the Manly jersey, the jersey itself was inclusive. Whether you're Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, whether you're gay, straight, didn't matter. Anyone who put on the jersey was part of that whānau, part of that club, part of that group, which meant everyone could play the sport. And I think one of the things that I got frustrated about was keep political ideology, keep wokeness and political correctness out of sports. Man, I just want to follow the sport. I don't want to I don't want to have a certain agenda, a certain view of gender and sexuality thrown down my throat when I'm watching a rugby league game. I just want to watch this beautiful sport. And I think I think there's been pushback from the community, maybe not, obviously not media, but pushback from people saying, we're tired of this rubbish. We're tired of this stuff rammed down our throat. We're tired of being told by corporate virtue signalers that this is how you should think, or this is how you should approach life. People have different views. And if we can't express all of these different views, then it's the intolerant tolerant that are raging against everyone else. And I think we need that kind of diversity of views. But I do think it is unfair, because often it's tolerance to the point of any kind of conservative Christian worldview. And then when it gets to that kind of stage, then actually we don't care about that. And I think that's the unfairness that I see a lot in society. And this manly stuff is just another example of that.
What do you say, though, to the demand that a Christian response should be that we should be loving, we should be inclusive, we should be accepting, and does it really matter wearing a shirt?
You know, I think that the boys have to make their own stand based on their own beliefs, but I think, yeah, Christian response also calls for truth as well. And the truth of the gospel, if you go back to what John 3:16 says, is that for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, so whoever believes in him. Hey, even in that sense, there is still an idea that with love must come truth. And the truth of the gospel is that we come to Christ with whatever background or mistakes or sins that we have, and Christ is able to forgive, whether it's a sexual challenge or an addiction or whatever it is. And so I think the actual real response that I'm enjoying seeing from a lot more Christians nowadays is actually to contend for the faith, to stand for their Christian views, to stand for their religious views, and not be ashamed of this conservative or this Christian or this biblical worldview that you might have. And so I think, look, I welcome that. That's the beauty of having a free country or free speech that has a diversity of views.
What about the pushback that, look, the shirt advertises a betting agency, and there's also alcohol advertising as well? Are the boys being hypocrites?
Yeah, I think, look, what I would say to that, though, is those guys are the sponsors of the club. This pride jersey, this ideology, this certain way of viewing a marriage and or sexual identity, whatever, they're not sponsoring the club. They're there to actually to force or to promote an ideology, or if you want a religion, a view of the world. And so I think there's a difference there between these sponsors of the club that pay for the salaries of these players. So I think that's a difference. I think the other unfairness that I see as well, if Sonny Bill can get away with some of the stuff, and other Muslim sports people can get away with some of their stuff of covering up certain sponsors, then it's a slippery slope. How far do you go? So I think that the difference with the pride jersey versus the betting agency or the alcohol stuff is, look, that's the sponsors of the club. That's who they work for. This pride stuff is an ideology. It's a worldview. It's an idea of gender and sexuality that actually these young men disagree with, and I think they should be allowed to disagree with.
Yeah, and there was actually a women's AFL player, that a Muslim player, who didn't want to wear the rainbow shirt, and so the club respectfully allowed her not to do that, and the media were quite polite about it and acknowledged diversity of thought and freedom. Ronji, just finally, my favourite story at the moment is Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, who didn't bow down to the culture and got into the fire. They had each other as support, and I guess one of the advantages of these 7 guys is that they've got each other to give them that extra support, which of course Israel Folau was very much on his own, and you know, he was really dumped on as an individual. I guess these 7 guys are getting strength off each other as much as people who are sending messages of support.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think the fact that they can bounce ideas off and count the costs together, I think is a wonderful thing. And look, I don't know all the religious or political views that these young men have. I think they've made a decision in this case, and they're standing by their decision. I think it's a good on them. Again, I'm sick and tired of having a political correctness, wokeness ideology rammed down my throat, and from corporates, from Disney, from every other company, every other government department that we have. I think just keep that stuff out of sports. I'd say keep it out of our children as well, out of our education system and so on. But I guess in this case, I'm glad that they have each other, and I feel for them. They're going to wear the cost of that. But I think for those that have views like that, there's going to be more of this kind of challenge moving forward. I think when you have things like hate speech reforms coming through and conversion therapy and all these other things that are flowing into our cultural wars here in Aotearoa, I think there's lines that need to be drawn, and these lines are being drawn quickly. And so I think for those that have Christian worldviews and biblical worldviews that are going to be increasingly seen as intolerant and seen as a bigot or seen as a homophobe, I'd say, well, be ready for the challenges that are coming, because those challenges, those attacks, the fear mongering, the mob mentality is going to come towards those views. And like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those young men, we need to stay faithful to God and His Word and the Christian worldview, regardless of the cost.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Ronji.
Go Manly.
Funny, I'm just finishing.